Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are jumping straight into the Australian public mindset, and we are armed with a really fantastic stack of sources. We've got a recent, very comprehensive poll that gives us a snapshot of opinion on, well, everything, from the political pulse to climate action, and even our collective fear of future technology.
That's absolutely right. The source material is the latest essential poll, which gathered views from over 1,000 Australians. And our mission today is not just to, read out the numbers. We want to sift through this data and find the surprising disconnects. We're looking for those gaps between what Australians are deeply worried about and what they actually believe is possible to fix.
Right.
It's all about that tension between, say, deep-seated concern and this sort of deep-seated paralyzing cynicism.
And crucially, we have a very specific window of context here. This poll data was collected just recently. It captured that raw public sentiment before Australia officially pulled out of seeking to host COP31.
Exactly. So these are the baseline beliefs that government policy decisions are running up against right now. It gives us a very clear picture of the public mood on these huge issues. So let's start with climate change, because the numbers here are immediately paradoxical, especially when you compare them to the settled science.
Okay, let's unpack this paradox. We're starting with the most basic question. What percentage of Australians accept that climate change is happening and that it's, caused by human activity?
And according to this poll, that baseline belief sits at 53%.
Just 53.
Yeah. Barely over half.
Barely. And what's immediately fascinating is that this 53%, it represents a really soft and fluctuating consensus. It's actually a 1-point decline just since March of this year.
And if we look at the historical trend, it shows a pretty significant slide, doesn't it?
It does.
This isn't just a recent wobble. Belief that climate change is real and human-caused was, 64% back in 2017? And even as recently as October 2021, it was sitting at 59%. So yeah, we've seen a gradual but significant erosion of public certainty.
And if you contrast that 53% with the other side.
Right, the 31% of voters who think the world is simply experiencing normal climate fluctuations, you realize that the Australian consensus is incredibly fragile and very polarized.
So my question is, why is this number sliding when we keep seeing more extreme weather? I mean, floods, fires, heat waves. Is the lived experience just failing to confirm the science for people, or is something else driving this?
This is where we have to bring in the scientific certainty, just to really underscore the dissonance here. While the public consensus floats around 50%, the scientific context is, well, it's nearly absolute. A landmark 2021 study confirmed that the scientific consensus that humans are altering the climate has passed 99.9%.
99.9%. That's universal agreement.
Precisely. And the study authors themselves said that the degree of certainty about greenhouse gases is similar to the agreement on, say, evolution or plate tectonics.
Plate tectonics.
Yeah.
These are bedrock scientific theories we're talking about.
Exactly.
So on one side, you have near total settled science, the kind of certainty you have about gravity. And on the other, public acceptance that just bounces around and is currently just over the halfway mark. What does that gap fundamentally tell us about public communication and trust in Australia?
Well, it tells us two key things. First, the conversation in Australia is not settled in the public sphere, no matter the facts. And second, it highlights a profound failure in communication.
Yeah.
Or maybe a deeper psychological resistance.
Right.
I mean, if the evidence is as strong as it is for plate tectonics, yet half the population is still unconvinced, then the issue has been successfully politicized. It's been filtered through media echo chambers so much that the evidence itself is now secondary to your political alignment.
It's the ultimate paradox, then. The more certain the science gets, the more volatile public acceptance becomes, which suggests skepticism is less about data and more about cynicism. Cynicism about the messengers or the solutions.
And that cynicism is the perfect bridge to our next segment, because now we move past believe in the problem to belief in our ability to fix it. It flips the conversation from is it real to can we actually do anything about it? And this is where the polling reveals a widespread sense of, well, fatalism.
And this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit depressing. Overall, only 39% of people think the world will be able to prevent dangerous levels of global warming. A plurality, 45%, said they do not believe this is possible.
Peter Lewis of Essential Media, he summed this up perfectly. He observed the polling showed a, quote, general sense of doom around whether action will create meaningful change.
So the feeling of, we're worried, we accept the risk, but the battle's already lost.
Exactly. It's a psychological state. And that cynicism is widespread. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the data reveals one of the deepest insights in the whole poll, this massive generational divide on optimism.
Okay, this age divide is startling, especially if you're a policymaker. So let's look at the optimist. People aged 18 to 34 were the most hopeful. Exactly half, 50%, believe climate effects could be prevented.
Right, and only 40% of that younger group disagreed. But then you look at the other end.
The older, generally wealthier demographic.
Those aged 55 and over were the most pessimistic group by a huge margin. Just over a quarter, 26% believe it could be prevented, while a massive 56% disagreed.
Think about that. Older Australians are literally twice as likely as young adults to believe the worst effects can't be prevented. That's a huge gulf in psychological outlook.
It is. It suggests younger generations still feel the urgency to fight, while older generations may feel they've just, watched political efforts fail too many times.
It makes you wonder what kind of rhetoric young people are consuming versus their parents. Is it lived experience where older people just remember promises failing to materialize? Or is it just a greater sense of fatalism?
It raises an important question. When you look at that 55-plus group, their political identity might be linked more to stability, to current economic structures. So radical, systemic changes designed to prevent future catastrophes seem less feasible, or maybe even undesirable to them.
Whereas the younger cohort has everything to gain.
And perhaps a more urgent, optimistic belief that technology and collective action can actually succeed.
We should also connect this specific climate worry back to the broader anxiety picture, because while 59% were worried about climate change, that fear isn't isolated.
Not at all. The data shows Australians have a whole hierarchy of worries. For example, 67% were worried about the development of self-aware AI. That was actually the highest concern.
Higher than climate change.
Yes. And 62% were worried about rising inequality leading to social upheaval. So what this grouping tells us is that Australians aren't just worried about melting ice caps. They're profoundly worried about losing control, whether that's to technology, to economic forces, or to a changing environment.
So Australians are worried about these big existential threats, but for the biggest environmental one, that worry turns into pessimism, especially for those over 55. Okay, now let's transition. Let's move from these abstract existential fears to where the public believes direct government intervention can actually succeed. And that brings us to the overwhelming mandate on curbing gambling advertisements.
It's such a sharp contrast to the doom around climate action.
It is.
The appetite for action here is overwhelming, and it's unified. This isn't nuanced data. It's a clear, powerful mandate for intervention.
Let's break down the numbers. 40% of voters want a total ban on all gambling ads. That's the biggest single block.
Right there, that's huge.
Then you have another 23% calling for heavy restrictions, but allowing some. And a further 28% backed moderate restrictions, like limiting the times and programs where ads can be shown.
So if you just total those numbers up,
It's 91%.
an overwhelming majority want some form of restriction or a complete ban. Only 9% said no action was needed. This tells you the volume of advertising it's reached a cultural tipping point.
Peter Lewis of Essential Media pointed this out. He said the public has a stronger appetite for action on gambling advertisements than the government.
Mm-hmm.
And why should you care about this? Because it shows where the government has genuine popular backing to spend political capital. This data suggests there's a strong base for greater ambition here.
Absolutely. It gives us a clear look at where the public believes action can be effective and immediate. Now, compare that desire for intervention on gambling to the tepid support for Australia hosting the COP31 climate summit.
Right. And for those who might not know, COP31 is the global UN climate change conference. Hosting it is a massive logistical effort. It puts your own climate policies right under the global microscope.
And yet, seeking to host this huge event only mustered 38% support.
So low.
Very low. Only 38% backed the push to host. 22% were opposed, but a huge 40% were undecided.
That 40% undecided figure is the most significant takeaway here. It just shows a profound lack of engagement or clarity on what the benefit of hosting would actually be.
It goes right back to that cynicism we talked about earlier. Australians are concerned. But these complex, ambitious, high-cost global moves, like a UN summit, they don't resonate as a solution they believe in. especially when you compare it to the tangible, everyday relief of banning gambling ads.
Right.
Lewis suggested that the decision for Australia to pull back from hosting COP31 is, quote, probably a net positive for the government, because the public support just wasn't there. They avoided a policy fight without having any popular backing.
So we have Australians deeply cynical about global climate success, but overwhelmingly ready for decisive action on a specific social issue. It's a fascinating study in selective optimism.
And finally, let's connect this public mood back to the political landscape, because the poll also gives us a snapshot of where the major party leaders are standing.
Starting with the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he saw a small uptick. Approval rose from 45 to 47%, while disapproval fell from 44 to 43.
So that nets him a +4 approval rating.
A small but positive movement.
Exactly. It's minor, but it's positive. It suggests that while there's all this anxiety about the big issues, the government is navigating the immediate political challenges okay. That +4 margin is likely built on maintaining confidence rather than pursuing grand, controversial new agendas.
And on the opposition side, Cecily saw a minor slip. Her approval rating dropped from 32 to 31%, and disapproval ticked up from 43 to 44.
Which leaves her with a net negative approval rating of -13. And that is a tough spot for any opposition leader. It suggests the public hasn't really bought into her narrative.
Or they're still waiting for a strong alternative vision.
And that's reflected in the wider liberal leadership contest data, which the poll also captured. When voters were asked who would be the best person to lead the Liberals from a list, Laley still holds a lead, but it's slim.
Very slim. She's at 14%. And right behind her is Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price at 11%. So that shows a strong emerging preference for a different kind of voice.
And then you have Andrew Hastie at 8%. And trailing them, you see Angus Taylor and Tim Wilson both tied at 5%.
That tightness between Lay and Price, just 3 points, tells you that the internal leadership question is still very much an open discussion.
Absolutely. The net negative rating for Lay combined with that public fragmentation. It means the opposition is struggling to harness all that anxiety and cynicism we saw earlier. Their own leadership question is adding to the sense of policy uncertainty, not countering it.
We have covered a lot of ground today, running from the profound failure of scientific communication to the intense, unified demand for action on betting ads.
And what the sources ultimately reveal is an Australian public that is significantly worried about climate, AI, social inequality, but also deeply cynical about the possibility of success, especially in that biggest battle, climate. And that cynicism is dramatically concentrated among older generations.
Yet they simultaneously demonstrate this overwhelming desire for decisive government intervention on social issues that impact daily life, like gambling ads. They want to see action on solvable, tangible problems, even if they despair over the seemingly unsolvable ones.
Let me leave you with this one final thought to mull over. Given that the scientific consensus on human-caused climate change is similar to the consensus on plate tectonics, what does it mean for a society when the conversation shifts so emphatically from is it real to is it even preventable? And why do Australians aged 55 and over feel twice as strongly that the battle is already lost compared to younger adults? It's that gap between accepted knowledge and generational hope that truly defines this moment.
A lot to think about. A powerful look at the state of the Australian psyche. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.